The Galactic Council voted humanity off the map with a single stroke of a penny euros. No trial, no appeal, just a unanimous decision to exile 8 billion people to the edge of known space and forget they ever existed. They figured humanity would wither out there and die quiet. 20 years later, a fleet the size of a small moon dropped out of warp above the Council's capital, and every single flag on those ships read the same word: home. The Council chamber on Threnos Prime had made a lot of hard calls in its 300-year history, but nothing quite like the vote that took place on what humans would later call Exile Day. Councillor Vex Marrow stood at the podium, reading the resolution in a flat, bureaucratic tone that made the weight of it feel almost administrative. Humanity has demonstrated repeated instability, aggressive territorial expansion, and a fundamental incompatibility with Council values. Effective immediately, humanity and all associated colonies are exiled beyond the threshold boundary, revoked of Council protection, trade access, and diplomatic standing. Ambassador James Reyes stood alone at the human delegation's seat, the only one who'd bothered showing up, because everybody else back home had already stopped believing this council would ever give them a fair shake. "You're sending 8 billion people into deep space with nothing," Reyes said, voice tight. "No support, no supply lines. You know what's out past the threshold boundary: empty systems, dead worlds. You're not exiling us, you're executing us slow." Councillor Marrow didn't even look up from his notes. "The vote is passed, Ambassador, 94-0. Reyes stood there a long moment, looking around the chamber at Species, who'd voted humanity out without a single voice of dissent. Euros. Species Earth had helped during 3 separate crises in the last decade alone. Species who'd taken human aid and then turned around and voted them off the map the first time it became politically convenient. "You're making a mistake," Reyes finally said. "History will judge that," Marrow replied. Already moving to the next agenda item like humanity's exile was a footnote in a much longer day. Reyes walked out of that chamber without another word, and within 6 months, every human ship, colony, and citizen had evacuated beyond the threshold boundary into the empty dark the Council assumed would swallow them whole. The Council moved on. New trade deals, new alliances. Humanity became a story people told at diplomatic dinners. A cautionary tale about a species that burned too bright and got what was coming. 20 years passed. The Council never checked on what happened beyond that boundary. They should have. Nobody in Council space knew what actually happened past the threshold boundary, because nobody bothered to look. That was the mistake. Out in the empty systems the Council had written off as dead ends, humanity found something the Council's own surveys had missed for 3 centuries: resource-rich systems, abandoned pre-Council infrastructure from an extinct civilization, and Euros, most importantly, Euro freedom from 94 empires who'd spent decades telling humans exactly how small they were supposed to stay. Ambassador James Reyes, now simply called Chancellor Reyes, stood on the observation deck of humanity's first deep space capital, a massive station built from salvaged pre-Council tech and pure human stubbornness, watching a new generation of ships roll off the construction lines below. 20 years, he murmured to General Elena Cho beside him. "Feels like it went by faster than I expected." "Feels like it went by exactly how long it needed to," Cho replied, arms crossed, watching the shipyard glow with fresh welding sparks. "We didn't have the luxury of slow, Chancellor. Every year out here was survival math. Build faster, adapt faster, or die out here just like they wanted." Humanity hadn't just survived exile. They'd been forced, by pure necessity, to solve problems the Council's comfortable, complacent empires had never had to face: resource scarcity, hostile environments, zero external support. Every human colony beyond the boundary had become a pressure cooker of innovation, engineering breakthroughs happening out of desperation that the Council's pampered science divisions were still decades away from discovering on their own. "They thought exile would break us," Reyes said quietly. "Instead, we built something they never saw coming." By year 15, humanity had unified every scattered colony beyond the boundary into a single governing body: Euros, the Soul Compact, an empire in every sense of the word, complete with a unified fleet, standardized tech, and a population that had grown harder, sharper, and far more capable than the frightened refugees the Council had shoved out the door 2 decades earlier. By year 20, Chancellor Reyes stood in front of the Compact's full war council with a simple proposal that had been 2 decades in the making. "It's time," he said, "to go home." Nobody in that room argued. The council capital of Threnos Prime hadn't changed much in 20 years a euro. Same chamber, same complacent bureaucracy, same 94 empires still congratulating themselves on a decision they'd stopped thinking about the moment the vote passed. That changed the moment sensors across the capital system lit up with contact readings that made every operator's blood run cold. "Report," barked Fleet Commander Nix Orel, staring at a sensor display that had to be malfunctioning, because nothing that large should have been able to approach undetected. "Sir, we're reading 800 vessels. Formation is unlike anything in our database. IFF signature is registering as a euros." The operator paused, voice cracking slightly. "A euro human? Sir, it's flagging as human." The council chamber erupted into chaos within minutes. Councillor Vex Marrow, older now but no less bureaucratic, found himself staring at emergency broadcasts showing a fleet the size of a small moon holding position at the edge of the capital system. Not attacking, not advancing a euros. Just there, patient and undeniable. A single shuttle detached from the lead vessel, escorted by a formation of fighters that moved with a precision the Council's own defense forces couldn't match, and made its slow, deliberate approach toward the Council Chamber's landing platform. Chancellor James Reyes stepped out, 20 years older. Uniform simple but unmistakably authoritative, flanked by General Elena Cho and a small honor guard. He walked into the same chamber he'd been dismissed from 2 decades earlier, and the room went dead silent. "Chancellor Reyes," Marrow said, voice unsteady for the first time in his career. "This is unexpected, is it?" Reyes replied evenly. "You gave us the boundary, the exile, and 20 years of silence. Did you really think we'd spend all that time out there just waiting to die?" Nobody answered. "The Sol Compact," Reyes continued, letting the words settle across the chamber, "recognized as a sovereign power, effective immediately. Full trade rights, full diplomatic standing, full military parity with any empire in this council." "And if we refuse?" Marrow asked, though the tremor in his voice suggested he already knew the answer. Reyes glanced toward the viewport, where the edge of humanity's fleet was visible even from the chamber floor, a silent, patient reminder of exactly what 20 years of exile had actually built. "Then we'll be gone before you finish the sentence," Reyes said. "And next time we won't be asking." The vote took less than an hour. 94-0, same as the exile vote 2 decades earlier a euros, except this time every empire in that chamber was voting out of respect, not dismissal. The Sol Compact was formally recognized as a full member of the Galactic Council, granted every right and protection the Council offered its oldest, most established empires. Chancellor Reyes signed the accord himself, standing in the same chamber where he'd once been told his species was fundamentally incompatible with Council values. "Funny how that works out," he said quietly to General Cho as they left the chamber afterward. "What's that, Chancellor?" 20 years ago, they told us we didn't belong here." Reyes looked back at the chamber doors closing behind them. "Turns out we didn't need their table. We built our own, and now they're the ones asking to sit at it." Councillor Vex Marrow, watching the compact delegation depart, finally understood what every empire in that chamber had missed 2 decades earlier. Exile hadn't been a punishment. It had been a gift, forcing humanity to build something far stronger than anything the Council's comfortable complacency could have produced. Word of the Sol Compact's return spread across every Council world within days, and with it, a lesson that would echo through diplomatic academies for generations. Never push a species to the edge of survival unless you're prepared for them to come back stronger than you ever imagined. Back aboard the compact flagship, Chancellor Reyes stood at the observation deck, watching Threnos Prime shrink behind them as the fleet set course back toward Sol Compact Space AE Euros, not retreating, but returning to a home they'd spent 20 years building into something the Council could no longer ignore, control, or dismiss. "You think they learned their lesson?" General Cho asked, standing beside him. Reyes allowed himself a small, tired smile. 20 years of exile, struggle, and hard-won triumph settling into something that finally felt like peace. "Doesn't matter if they learned it," he said. "We already proved the only thing that ever needed proving." "What's that?" "You can push humanity to the edge of the map," Reyes said, watching the stars stretch out ahead of them. "But you'd better believe we'll build an empire out there and bring it right back to your front door."